This video is for students who are writing historical narratives. In this example, we'll be looking at the narrative utilized in days 6 and 7 of Unit 3. However, the skills and approaches we are going to use throughout this video are applicable to most other historical narratives you might create, and the specific content referenced in this video can easily be replaced with whatever you happen to be studying. This video will basically tell you everything you need to know about historical narratives and the process to create them. So before getting into the specifics of what historical narratives are, I just want to give you a brief overview of these two lessons. During the first lesson, which you can see the objective right here, all you're going to be doing is building your own understanding of what historical narrative is and what similarities and differences exist between this form of writing and other types of writing you've done in your high school career. The second day, which is day 7, and I'll show you the objective right here, will allow you to follow along with your teacher as they model deconstruction of a historical narrative, and then you will deconstruct another one on your own. And by deconstruct, we mean break down into its different elements so that each part can be identified and better understood. And ultimately, you will use what you've learned about reconstruction in the lessons preceding this, along with your new knowledge about what a historical narrative is, and you're going to create or construct one of your own about the 1860s. So in the first day of this lesson, you're going to be doing a deep read of a text called Writing Historical Narrative. And probably the easiest way for you to access it is through the slides that your teacher made available to you. You're going to look for a slide that has to do with the introduction model, and at the bottom is a link. And you're going to click that link and it's going to take you to the text. Now, in the event that maybe you haven't read this text in a while about how to write a historical narrative, or maybe you have read it recently but you need a little clarification, I'm going to present to you 4 major takeaways about historical narratives. So first, and this is probably one of the biggest ones, we're going to see down here that these are not primary or secondary sources. They're what we call tertiary sources. And this is kind of like what your textbook is, where they give a general overview of the historical time period that is being discussed. And since you're going to be writing in large general terms, you get to focus more on the story, that's why it's called a narrative, than the arguments, the interpretations, and the historical analyses that you might have to do in like social studies essays that you may have written before. Second, since it is your story, you get to decide how you want to construct the plot and how you are going to frame the moments of action, which include the historical figures you're going to include, the actions they took, and why they did what they did, which you believe are pivotal to your narrative. I would also recommend using the Deconstructing a Historical Narrative tool that you use to help break down and analyze the elements of the model historical narratives in the lessons as a pre-writing tool to help you decide which historical participants and themes and issues you are going to want to include in your own. And this is where you would go back and review the content about Reconstruction from the previous lessons. And since this one is going to be about the 1860s, when it comes to constructing your plot, you're probably going to gravitate towards progress and decline. And I'll talk more about what that means at the end of this video. Third, in this lesson, your teacher modeled with you how to break down a historical narrative into its components, making it easier for us to understand each of them. And I'm going to pull up one of them right now. And here's the second one that you read. And you should really look at both of these texts as models to help you prepare for when you construct your own. For instance, pay close attention to the transitions and connectives that the authors used. Also, be mindful of their length. Both are about 200 words long, and that means as you are pre-writing, you need to be very thoughtful about the historical figures, events, and actions you not only choose to include, but also exclude. And fourth, and let me get back to the text here, even though it is more of writing about an experience, it is not merely an artistic writing form. It still must be historically reliable and accurate. So earlier I mentioned some of you will be drawn to progress and decline as the concept you use to construct your plot. And to demonstrate what I mean by this, I'd like to use your second text from class as an example. And the title of that one is An Era of Competing Populist Movements. Now, if I'm looking at this historical narrative, which, it's kind of set in the context of the 2010s, and I'm looking for things about progress, you might see things such as Barack Obama, the first African American president, or if we scroll down a little bit further, populists who were queer and color coalesced under the hashtag Black Lives Matter to renew the struggle for racial civil rights. And if I was discussing decline, I might look for things such as this excerpt over here that says, people wooing nationalists and corporate America with conspiracy theories and the promise of a country renewed by wealth and whiteness. Now, it should be noted that progress and decline are pretty subjective terms, and when mentioning these two things, you should consider for whom is this progress, and also for whom is this decline. If I were going to select progress and decline when writing a historical narrative of the 1860s, for progress, I would consider mentioning things such as the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, along with an increase in the number of African American politicians who were elected to office. However, when writing about decline, I would bring up things such as the Black Codes, the growth of the Ku Klux Klan, and President Andrew Johnson. And this is when you should review all of the content about Reconstruction from lessons 1 through 5 and use the graphic organizer to kind of guide your pre-writing and help you decide what you're going to include in your historical narrative. And last, if we go back to this text that we've been looking at the very bottom is a final checklist of key qualities that a good narrative has. Remember, tell your story. Focus on the process. Do not get bogged down in historical details and analyses. Tell your story by focusing on the characters, the events they experienced, and the actions they took.